The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines. For most couples, this would be cause for celebration. But when Delilah Westbrook held that plastic stick in her trembling hands on a cold February morning in Bakersfield, California, she knew her world was about to collapse. Because a man sleeping in the bed beside her, her husband of 3 years, Camden Westbrook, wasn't the father. What Camden discovered 3 weeks later would shatter everything he believed about his marriage, his future, and the woman he thought he knew. And what happened next would leave investigators scrambling to piece together a puzzle that seemed impossible to solve. What do you think? When secrets as devastating come to light, how far would someone go to protect them? Let me know in the comments. On March 15th, 2023, Delilah Westbrook vanished without a trace. Her car was found abandoned on Highway 58, keys still in the ignition, purse left behind, and a cell phone displaying 17 missed calls from a frantic husband. The only clue to her whereabouts was a single drop of blood on the driver's seat and a crumpled note hidden beneath the floor mat that would change everything investigators thought they knew about this case. But to understand how a pregnant woman could simply disappear into thin air, we need to go back to where the story really begins. Not with her disappearance, but with a web of deception that had been slowly tightening around the Westbrook marriage for months. We're diving deep into a case that exposes a dangerous intersection of betrayal, desperation, and the lengths people will go to when their deepest secrets threaten to destroy everything they built. This isn't just a story about a missing person. It's about the shocking discovery that some marriages are built on foundations so fragile that one devastating truth can bring the entire structure crashing down. And trust me, the truth about what Delilah was hiding will leave you questioning everything you think you know about the people closest to you. Camden Westbrook was the kind of man who prided himself on control. As a financial advisor for a prestigious firm in downtown Bakersfield, he managed millions in client assets with meticulous precision. His office walls displayed certificates of achievement, his desk arranged with military-like order, and his calendar planned weeks in advance. At 34, he had built what most would consider the American dream. A successful career, a beautiful home in the Panorama Bluff subdivision, and a wife who turned heads wherever they went. Delilah had entered his life like lightning cutting through darkness. They met at a charity gala in 2019, where she worked as an event coordinator for high-profile fundraisers. While Camden calculated risk assessments, Delilah created magic from chaos, transforming empty ballrooms into enchanted spaces where Silicon Valley executives wrote 7-figure checks for children's hospitals. Her laugh could fill a room. Her presence commanded attention, and Camden found himself completely captivated by someone who existed in a world so different from his own. Their courtship was a study in opposites. Camden proposed with a spreadsheet detailing their 5-year financial plan, alongside a 2-carat diamond ring. Delilah said yes through tears of laughter, calling him beautifully ridiculous. Their wedding in Napa Valley was featured in California Weddings magazine. Camden in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, Delilah radiant in vintage lace, surrounded by vineyard hills that seemed to promise endless happiness. But perfection, as Camden would learn, was often just an elaborate performance. The first crack appeared 18 months into their marriage. Delilah began working late, claiming big clients demanded her attention for evening events across the Central Valley. Camden, trusting and logical, accepted her explanations. Event planning was unpredictable. After all, he supported her ambitions, even when it meant eating dinner alone 3 nights a week or waking up to find her side of the bed cold. What Camden didn't know was that Delilah's client meetings often took place in a penthouse apartment overlooking Kern River, where she spent hours with Joaquin Morales, a charismatic real estate developer whose projects were reshaping downtown Bakersfield. Joaquin was everything Camden wasn't. Spontaneous where Camden was planned, passionate where Camden was measured, dangerous where Camden was safe. Their affair began innocently enough. Joaquin hired Delilah to coordinate the grand opening of his latest luxury development. Professional meetings shifted to coffee discussions, then dinner conversations that stretched past midnight. Delilah told herself she was networking, building valuable connections. But when Joaquin's hand brushed hers across restaurant tables, when his texts made her heart race in ways Camden's never had, She knew she was crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. If you're fascinated by how seemingly perfect relationships can harbor such explosive secrets, you'll want to stick around. Because this story is just getting started. The affair intensified through the fall of 2022. While Camden analyzed market trends and planned their future retirement, Delilah lived a double life that grew more complicated by the day. She created elaborate alibis, maintained separate social media accounts, and became an expert at compartmentalizing her emotions. To Camden, she remained a devoted wife who asked about his day and planned their weekend getaways. To Joaquin, she was the exciting woman who challenged his perspectives and made him believe in possibilities beyond his bachelor lifestyle. The psychological toll was immense. Delilah began experiencing panic attacks during routine conversations with Camden, terrified he might detect a deception. She started fights over minor issues, his methodical approach to loading the dishwasher, his habit of reviewing their monthly expenses together, creating distance that would justify her emotional withdrawal. Camden, confused by these sudden conflicts, attributed them to work stress and tried harder to be supportive, unknowingly making Delilah's guilt exponentially worse. December 2022 brought unseasonably warm weather to Bakersfield, but inside the Westbrook home, an emotional winter had settled over their marriage. Camden noticed the changes but couldn't identify their source. Delilah's spontaneous nature, once charming, now felt erratic. She would disappear for hours without explanation, return with expensive purchases she claimed were client gifts, and respond to simple questions with defensive anger that left him bewildered. The pregnancy happened during what Delilah later described to investigators as the worst possible moment. She had been planning to end the affair, recognizing the unsustainable nature of her double life. But one evening in January, after a particularly intense argument with Camden about their lack of intimacy, she sought comfort in Joaquin's arms. The encounter was emotionally charged, fueled by her need for validation and his promises that they could build something real together. 3 weeks later, staring at those two pink lines, Delilah faced a mathematical impossibility. She and Camden hadn't been intimate in over 2 months, a fact that would be immediately obvious to a man who tracked everything in his life with obsessive detail. The timing made paternity undeniable, and the consequences terrifying. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the obstetrician Delilah secretly consulted, would later testify about their first appointment. She was visibly distressed. Dr. Vasquez recalled, "When I congratulated her on the pregnancy, she broke down completely. She kept repeating that this would destroy everything she had worked for." The doctor offered counseling resources, but Delilah declined, stating she needed to figure this out on her own. Meanwhile, Joaquin's reaction to the pregnancy news created another layer of complexity. Far from the panic Delilah expected, he expressed genuine joy. He had been divorced for 5 years, had no children, and saw this as an opportunity to start the family he'd always wanted. He began pressuring Delilah to leave Camden, offering to support her financially and emotionally through the transition. "This is our chance," he told her during a heated conversation in his penthouse. "Stop living a lie and start building something authentic with me." But leaving Camden meant more than ending a marriage. It meant admitting to 3 years of deception, destroying the reputation she'd built in their social circle, and facing potential financial ruin. Camden had been meticulous about keeping their assets in his name, a decision he justified as protecting their wealth from potential lawsuits related to her event planning business. Now, that same protection became a trap. Delilah's behavior during February became increasingly erratic. She missed important client meetings, forgot to pay bills that Camden typically handled, and began drinking wine at lunch, something completely out of character for someone who prided herself on professionalism. Her assistant, Margot Chen, noticed the changes but attributed them to relationship problems rather than the life-altering crisis actually consuming her boss. What would you do in Delilah's position? Share your thoughts in the comments, because her next decision will set off a chain of events that nobody could predict. The breaking point came on February 28th, when Camden suggested they start trying for a baby. They were having dinner at Locale, their favorite Italian restaurant, celebrating Camden's promotion to senior partner. He had planned the conversation carefully, presenting a timeline that accounted for Delilah's career goals and their financial readiness. As he outlined his vision of their future family, Delilah felt the walls closing in around her. That night, she made a desperate phone call to Joaquin. Through tears, she confessed that she couldn't continue the charade much longer. Her body was already beginning to change, and soon the pregnancy would be impossible to hide. They had to make a decision about their future, and they had to make it quickly. Joaquin's response would prove to be the catalyst for everything that followed. Then let's end this nightmare once and for all. March arrived with brutal honesty. Camden's world began cracking on March 3rd, when a routine interaction revealed the first glimpse of his wife's hidden reality. He had been searching for aspirin in Delilah's purse when his fingers brushed against an unfamiliar prescription bottle. The label read prenatal vitamins, Dr. Elena Vasquez, with instructions to take daily during pregnancy. Camden stared at the bottle for a full minute, his analytical mind processing this information like a complex equation that refused to balance. Delilah hadn't mentioned seeing a doctor. They hadn't discussed trying for children beyond his recent suggestion. Most crucially, they hadn't been intimate in months, a fact that had been causing him increasing concern about their relationship. Rather than confronting Delilah immediately, Camden did what came naturally. He investigated. He called Dr. Vasquez's office, claiming to be Delilah's husband inquiring about appointment scheduling. The receptionist cheerfully confirmed that Mrs. Westbrook was indeed a patient and asked if he wanted to reschedule her upcoming ultrasound appointment. The appointment was for March 10th. Camden marked the date in his calendar with the same precision he used for board meetings, but his hand shook as he wrote. Over the following week, Camden became a detective in his own home. He noticed details that had previously escaped his attention: Delilah's sudden aversion to coffee, her frequent bathroom trips, the way she held her stomach when she thought he wasn't looking. He monitored her phone usage, discovering patterns of communication with an unknown number that occurred daily, sometimes for hours. The breaking point came on March 9th, the evening before the ultrasound appointment Delilah hadn't mentioned. Camden confronted her in their kitchen, the prenatal vitamins placed deliberately on the granite countertop between them like evidence in a courtroom. "I found these in your purse," Camden said, his voice steady despite the emotional earthquake occurring inside him, "along with appointment cards for a doctor I've never heard of. Are you pregnant, Delilah?" The color drained from Delilah's face. For several seconds, the only sound was the hum of their refrigerator and the distant traffic on Chester Avenue. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes." Camden's next question came with mathematical precision. "How far along?" 12 weeks. The timeline was impossible, and they both knew it. Camden's expression shifted from confusion to comprehension to something Delilah had never seen before: cold, calculated fury. 12 weeks, he repeated slowly. "That means conception occurred in mid-December. We haven't been intimate since November, Delilah. So either you're lying about the timing, or you're lying about something much worse." The moment of truth had arrived. How do you think Delilah responded when faced with undeniable evidence? Let me know your predictions in the comments. What happened next would be seared into Camden's memory forever. Instead of denial or explanation, Delilah collapsed into one of her kitchen chairs and began sobbing with the force of someone whose carefully constructed world had just imploded. Between gasps, she confessed to the affair with Joaquin, the months of deception, and the impossible situation the pregnancy had created. Camden listened in silence, his face becoming increasingly impassive as each detail emerged. When Delilah finished, he asked just one question: "Do you love him?" Her answer, a barely audible yes, sealed their fate. Camden left the house that night without another word, checking into the Hampton Inn on Rosedale Highway. He spent hours staring at the ceiling, processing not just a betrayal but a complete reconstruction of everything he thought he knew about his life. The woman he had planned to grow old with was carrying another man's child and claimed to love that man. By morning, Camden had made his decision about how to respond to this revelation. Camden returned home on March 10th with the cold efficiency of a man executing a business plan. He found Delilah in their bedroom, Still wearing the same clothes from the night before, her eyes swollen from hours of crying. She looked up hopefully when he entered, perhaps expecting reconciliation or at least discussion about their future. Instead, Camden placed a manila folder on the dresser and spoke with clinical detachment. "I've contacted divorce attorneys. You have until the end of the month to find somewhere else to live." What Delilah didn't realize was that Camden's methodical nature extended far beyond their confrontation. During his sleepless night at the hotel, he had accessed their joint financial accounts, discovering patterns of spending that painted a clearer picture of her deception. Expensive dinners at restaurants they'd never visited together. Hotel charges during times she claimed to be working late. Cash withdrawals that coincided with her mysterious absences. But Camden's investigation had also revealed something else, something that would become crucial to understanding what happened next. Through his connections in the financial industry, he learned that Joaquin Morales was facing serious legal troubles. The FBI had been investigating his real estate developments for potential money laundering, and several of his properties were under federal scrutiny. The charismatic developer who had swept Delilah off her feet was potentially heading toward criminal charges and financial ruin. Delilah, unaware of Joaquin's legal jeopardy, desperately tried to salvage her marriage. She promised to end the affair, offered to seek counseling, and pleaded with Camden to consider the years they had built together. Her efforts were met with stone-cold silence. Camden had already begun mentally dividing their assets, calculating alimony obligations, and planning his post-divorce life with the same precision he brought to investment portfolios. The situation deteriorated rapidly over the following days. Delilah moved into their guest bedroom, transforming their home into a battleground of silent resentment and awkward encounters. She continued working, though her performance suffered dramatically. Clients complained about missed deadlines and unprofessional behavior. Her assistant, Margot, began handling most communications, shielding Delilah from the consequences of her emotional collapse. Meanwhile, Camden's behavior became increasingly erratic, a stark contrast to his usually controlled demeanor. Colleagues noticed his aggressive tactics during client meetings and his uncharacteristic drinking during business lunches. He canceled their joint social engagements without explanation and began staying at the office until late hours, avoiding home entirely on some nights. On March 13th, Delilah made a decision that would accelerate the crisis toward its devastating conclusion. Unable to bear the toxic atmosphere at home and desperate for emotional support, she drove to Joaquin's penthouse apartment to tell him about Camden's discovery and their impending divorce. Joaquin's reaction was not what she expected. Instead of relief or excitement about their future together, he seemed agitated and distracted. When Delilah pressed him about his mood, he revealed a federal investigation and the possibility that his assets might be frozen within weeks. "This changes everything," he told her, pacing his living room while she sat stunned on his leather sofa. "I might not be able to support you and the baby the way I promised. We need to think about alternatives. Can you imagine the shock of learning that your lifeline might be disappearing just when you need it most? What would you do? Share your thoughts below." The conversation that followed would haunt investigators for months. According to Joaquin's later testimony, Delilah became hysterical when she fully grasped their situation. She was losing Camden, potentially losing Joaquin, facing single motherhood without financial security, and carrying a child whose existence had already destroyed her life. It was during this emotional breakdown that Joaquin allegedly made a suggestion that would change everything. "Maybe there's a way to solve both our problems. Camden doesn't know about my legal troubles yet. What if we could make this work in our favor?" The details of their plan would remain partially obscured even after extensive investigation, but the basic framework was chilling in its calculated desperation. The morning of March 15th began like any other Wednesday in the Westbrook household, except for the suffocating tension that had become their new normal. Camden left for work at exactly 7:30 a.m., maintaining his routine despite the chaos in his personal life. Delilah waited until his BMW disappeared around the corner before making a phone call that would set the day's events in motion. "It's time," she whispered into her phone, her voice steady for the first time in weeks. According to cell phone records later analyzed by investigators, Delilah made 17 calls that morning to her bank, her insurance company, and several clients canceling upcoming events. She withdrew $8,000 in cash from their joint account, citing a family emergency when the teller questioned the large amount. Her final call was to Dr. Vasquez's office, canceling all future appointments. At 11:47 a.m., Delilah's Honda Accord was captured on traffic cameras heading east on Highway 58 toward the Tahafe Mountains. She was alone in the vehicle, wearing the same blue sweater Camden had seen her in that morning. This would be the last confirmed sighting of her alive. What happened during the next 6 hours remains one of the most puzzling aspects of the case. Delilah's car was discovered at 6:15 p.m. by a California Highway Patrol officer responding to reports of an abandoned vehicle. The Honda sat on the shoulder near mile marker 67, hazard lights still blinking, driver's door slightly ajar. Officer Rebecca Santos described the scene. The vehicle appeared to have been there for some time. Keys were in the ignition, purse on the passenger seat, cell phone showing multiple missed calls. There was no sign of mechanical trouble or accident damage. It looked like someone had simply walked away. But the single drop of blood on the driver's seat told a different story. The blood, later confirmed through DNA analysis to be Delilah's, suggested something violent had occurred. However, the lack of additional evidence, no signs of struggle, no defensive wounds on the upholstery, no indication of forced entry, puzzled forensic specialists. The blood appeared fresh, as if the injury had happened shortly before the car was abandoned. Camden's alibi was ironclad. Security cameras at his office building showed him entering at 8:15 a.m. and remaining there until 4:30 p.m., when he left for a client meeting across town. Restaurant receipts and witness testimony confirmed his whereabouts until nearly 7 p.m., when he returned home to find 17 missed calls from his missing wife. His reaction to the news was captured on police body cameras when officers arrived to inform him of the discovery. Camden appeared genuinely shocked, repeatedly asking if Delilah had been in an accident or if there were any hospitals she might have been taken to. His concern seemed authentic, though investigators noted his first question was about the status of their joint financial accounts. This is where the case takes an unexpected turn. Based on what you've heard so far, what do you think happened to Delilah? The truth is more complex than anyone initially suspected. The crumpled note found beneath the car's floor mat 3 days later changed everything investigators thought they knew about the case. Written in Delilah's handwriting, it contained just 4 words that would launch a massive search operation and reveal the true scope of the deception that had consumed the Westbrook marriage. "I can't do this anymore." But forensic analysis of the paper revealed something that didn't make sense. The ink was still wet when the note was discovered, despite the car sitting abandoned for 3 days. Either someone had planted the note after the fact, or Delilah had written it just before disappearing, and someone wanted investigators to find it. The search for Delilah Westbrook expanded across 3 counties, involving bloodhounds, helicopter surveillance, and volunteer search parties. Yet despite extensive efforts, no trace of her was found beyond that mysterious blood drop and the carefully placed note. As investigators dug deeper into the case, they discovered the web of deception was far more intricate than a simple affair. Financial records revealed suspicious transactions. Cell phone data showed communications with individuals whose identities were carefully concealed, and witness testimonies began contradicting each other in ways that suggested coordinated deception. The question wasn't just where Delilah had gone. It was whether she had disappeared voluntarily or if something far more calculated had taken place. 6 months after Delilah Westbrook's disappearance, the case remains officially open, but the investigation has revealed truths that shatter everything we thought we knew about marriage, deception, and the lengths people will go to escape impossible situations. Camden Westbrook sold a Panorama Bluffs house and relocated to Denver, where he works for a private wealth management firm. He has never spoken publicly about his wife's disappearance, though sources close to the investigation suggest he believes Delilah orchestrated her own vanishing to escape the consequences of her choices. Joaquin Morales was indicted on federal money laundering charges 3 weeks after Delilah's disappearance. During plea negotiations, He provided testimony about his relationship with Delilah that investigators found both illuminating and deeply troubling. While he maintained he had no knowledge of her whereabouts, phone records show they communicated extensively in the days leading up to her disappearance. Conversations that abruptly stopped at 11:30 a.m. on March 15th. The most haunting aspect of this case isn't what we know, it's what remains hidden. Financial investigators discovered that $47,000 was transferred from various accounts associated with both Delilah and Joaquin to an offshore account just days before she vanished. The account was accessed once, 2 weeks after her disappearance, from an IP address that couldn't be traced. Dr. Elena Vasquez continued providing prenatal care records to investigators, hoping they might offer clues about Delilah's mental state. The records painted a picture of a woman under extreme psychological pressure, someone who felt trapped by circumstances beyond her control. But they also revealed something else. Delilah had researched options for giving birth outside traditional medical systems, including off-the-grid birthing centers and midwives who operated without official documentation. The baby, if born, would be walking by now. This thought haunts everyone connected to the case. Recent developments have kept hope alive. A woman matching Delilah's description was reportedly seen at a farmer's market in northern Oregon, but by the time investigators arrived, she had vanished again. Security footage was too grainy for positive identification, but witnesses described her as appearing healthy and carrying a young child. The case may be cold, but some questions burn hotter than ever. What do you think happened to Delilah Westbrook? Was this an elaborate escape plan, or something far more sinister? Share your theories in the comments below. Perhaps the most disturbing lesson from this case is how completely we can misunderstand the people closest to us. Camden thought he knew every detail of Delilah's life, yet missed months of deception happening under his own roof. Delilah believed she understood Joaquin's character, only to discover his legal troubles at the worst possible moment. And we, as observers, must grapple with the possibility that sometimes people simply vanish into new lives, leaving behind only questions and the devastating wreckage of the relationships they abandoned. If this story interests you, please subscribe, like and share to enjoy more crime stories like this.